Anybody that has been looking at events across West Africa and Africa, particularly the francophone countries in Africa, shouldn't see the coup that happened recently in Nigeria as a surprise, because we are talking of, you have a situation where you have prevalent poverty, you have issues of terrorism, and you have a situation where the pact, the agreement you have with your former colonial master isn't working to your benefit. Definitely you are going to have some kind of pushback, either from an institutional stakeholder like the army, the military, or even uprising from the common people on the street. So I think there is a kind of an agreement between the people who are on the streets, and institutional stakeholder like the army, the military in Niger. They had one singular goal, and which is to rescue their country. Well, that is seemingly, to rescue their country, and that was what happened. And if one has to look at, the kind of the story that is coming out from Niger, what you see is that the coup has a widespread popularity. That must not be wished away. You cannot wish that away. I'm not too familiar with the former president, but I think from what has been said and what we've been reading about from experts who know the going on, things that have been going on within the country, it is to the effect that the ousted president hasn't been able to to connect with the common man on the streets, and he hasn't been able to connect with the key stakeholders in the security architecture of the state. So that is where you have that kind of a problem. But unfortunately, it's a problem for the whole of West Africa as it is right now. Let us be clear about certain things. Number one, I think it would be very unfair to put everything on the head of President Bola Ahmed Tinubu. That would be most unfair. Because we need to understand how the regional body works. Yes, he is the chairman of, ECOWAS, but we must understand that he's just like a first among equals. He was put in that position to coordinate the affairs of the regional bloc. So I think it was a consensus agreement, on the part of, the so-called democratically elected leaders within the ECOWAS to move in and forcefully, return to civilian rule, in Niger. So be that as it may, the buck still stops at Tinubu's desk. He is the head, he is the leader. I think that Nigeria carries a very, very big sway in the ECOWAS body, because most of these other countries rely on us for logistics, for money, and for direction. So by and large, we can still say that the buck still stops at his desk, but for me, I think what ECOWAS needed to have done, instead of making that blanket declaration, was to do a deeper introspection as to why countries within their ranks are favoring coup d'etats. I think that should be the first question. And he is in a better position to understand that. Because right here in Nigeria, he is facing a very serious legitimacy issue. INEC, the electoral body conducted what is adjudged to be the worst form of election that we have ever seen in this country. And the matters are still at the presidential tribunal. The matter hasn't been resolved. And even, while you have that, you still have a lot of reports, especially the EU reports, stating insisting that what happened in Nigeria was like coming to witness a crime scene. So how does a man that does not have the legitimacy of the office upon which he was nominated or elected as the ECOWAS chairman now carry on to enforce democracy as it were in another country? Then of course, one has to talk about the decision to even in the first to contemplate a military action. I don't know. I've sat down many times. What could be the rationale behind that decision in the first place? And I keep going back to two options. Number one, there are no deep thinkers around Tinubu. There are no people. I'm not sure he has people who think deeply around him. The second option is that he could be doing the bidding of some interest that is outside Africa. Of course, we all know that we know what is happening in the world. We know, the Afro-Franco relationship, especially with former colonial countries. It's both political, it's both political and economic. As a matter of fact, there are some studies that says that France would be nothing without its African former colonies. So now, and don't forget too, France is a part and parcel of the West, and they have an abiding interest in Africa, especially as you have the Ukraine and Russia war going on. So to some extent, one can say that Tinubu might be under pressure. So those are the two options that I see happening, playing out here. And if I were to advise, stakeholders in Africa, West Africa, and Nigeria, and it is to the effect that this is not the time. I think things like this, there should be more unequivocal response to the decision of ECOWAS, to the effect that there must be deeper thinking in the actions that we do, in the actions that we take, from now henceforth. Unfortunately, today appears to be the deadline of the 7-day ultimatum. Is the 7-day ultimatum that was given to Niger? But from what we learned last week, the military heads, the heads of defenses in all the ECOWAS countries sat down and reviewed the situation and said they were not going in for a military option, in the first instance. But all the same, I sincerely pray that enough damage hasn't been done already, because the moment you contemplate, a military action, that's number one. You even deployed, and even effect, international policies to affect, your neighboring country. It's like an act of war has been, declared. Don't forget that ECOWAS imposed a no-fly zone sanction, and Nigeria shut the border between itself and Niger Republic. We might see it as just it's not mild. It's not a mild action. It is not. Don't forget that Niger is landlocked. For a movement of goods and services, it still depends largely on Nigerian ports to do things. So when you have that kind of offensive, policy offensive against the neighboring countries, like you have declared war already. So let's see how things goes in the days ahead. I think the Sahel and Sub-Saharan, is suffering from the fallout of the dismantling of the Libya. I think that is where the whole thing started from. And of course, there were failures of governance in all these institutional failures and failure in governance in some of these countries that gave rise to this insurgency. And of course, the kind of local politics that we play that accentuated our differences more than what we have together. I don't really, if there is going to be any, fallout security-wise, for me, my thinking is that don't forget that these francophone countries appear to have a backing in Russia. And so far, the Wagner Group, that is the Russian super military complex, appears to have achieved more results in containing insurgency, Boko Haram, and terrorism in some of these countries that have employed their services. You talk of a Central African Republic, you talk of Burkina Faso, Mali. They've been able to dislodge to a very large extent some of the activities of the terrorists. So you know, I see the possibility in these zones. I see the possibility of containment of these terrorist activities. You know, if that agreement is allowed to consolidate, I see it happening, and it also says a lot about the commitment of the West to democracy in Africa. You spend a lot of money trying to help us democratize, but you are willing to put your back to it in terms of ensuring that there is security in the region. In fact, in most instances, you discover that there are, there are suggestions that these terrorists could have been backed by the West themselves, so as to have access to resources in all these places. Say, for instance, in the Niger Republic that we were just talking about, one of the allegations the military had against their president, the outside president, was that they wanted to go after the Boko Haram terrorists, and the president ordered them not to. So how do you reconcile that? So, and of course, don't forget that we within our context in Nigeria, we hear reports of countermanding orders that tend to allow insurgency, Boko Haram, banditry to breathe in the country. So you start asking yourself, what is going on? You see a situation where a known bandit is turbaned in an emirate. So at some point you start asking yourself, what exactly is going on? So for me, if I think it should be a wake-up call for Nigeria, for stakeholders in Nigeria, to see that if we are unwilling, if we as citizens are unwilling to take our destiny in our own hands, other countries might not be that docile like us. Yes, we have relative peace. We've been able to manage ourselves in the last how many years since 1999. We returned back to democracy, but we need to critically ask ourselves, in terms of dividends of democracy, in the areas of governance, in the areas of human development index, have we fared better? That is the question. So you see, if you claim allegiance to a particular system of governance, and you expect some dividends, and it appears not to be coming, what do you do then? For me, as a person, I have never been an advocate of coup, and I will not start being one now. As a matter of fact, I think what the Francophone countries that have embraced coup are enjoying now is temporary relief. We've seen it before. The moment one coup, takes over from another, you see wild jubilations, only to be short-lived. You see, for me, military rule does not allow for civil governance. It doesn't allow for, the kind of rapprochement you have under a political system, no matter how bad it is. No matter how bad it is, you still have dissenting voices. You still have the issue of human rights. You have the right of opinion. Even when your opinion is quashed, you still have legal redress. You have institutions that take care of your aspiration. Even though you have the majority at the end of the day takes have their way, the minority have their say. So for me, military coup has never been it for me. I have never, for once, advocated that we would go the way of the military. And I think, to a very large extent, that the other countries who have should learn from what is happening currently in Nigeria. You understand? We had a sham election, no doubt about it. A lot of things were wrong. There are a lot of inadequacies, a lot of discrepancies were happening. But we could take the example of both PDP and Labour Party taking the matter to court and look at the the volume of interest it has generated across board. They even internationalized the issue. You see, like we've never had it before. You see people reporting, reporting live what is happening in the courts. You see a lot of interpretation. You see a lot of nuances that people never knew were there in the law. For the first time, we are putting the judiciary on the spot. You understand? So, regardless of how the judgment goes, regardless of how it goes, it is either of one thing. It's either the judiciary redeems itself or it condemns itself. Either case, justice will be served one way or the other. You see, it will be extremely difficult to make a categorical, take a categorical take on how their decision. Make a categorical call, if I may put it that way, because I wasn't at the table where they met with government officials. But be that as it may, we have to understand certain things, and one of them is this. If the civil society or labor, considers the merit of strike vis-a-vis not striking, and they see that let us give them an opportunity to redeem themselves, and decide, okay, let us suspend the strike. Let's see if they are going to fulfill this part of the agreement we initially agreed on. I think that is positive, and I believe that the reason why they suspend that strike is is what we have been saying, that the issue of subsidy removal has a buy-in of a lot of stakeholders. Even NLC agrees that subsidy has to go. But you see, the modus operandi that is the method of removing it is what is in contention. Well, the current administration of Bola Ahmed Tinubu believes that it has to be yanked off, and let's go through the pain once and for all. For me, I think that would be most unfair, on the masses, on people, on the public, because when you talk of, I think the most balanced take on that subsidy issue is that it's an organized racket, as popularized by the presidential candidate of Labour Party, Peter Obi, and he gave reasons, he gave statistics, why it is an organized racket. He gave the instance of Pakistan. More number of vehicles were roughly the same size, the same, more routes. So in terms of mileage, in terms of consumption, they should consume more. But when you look at the fuel consumed compared to us, you see an astronomical figure, that makes the Pakistani, instance very, very small compared to Nigeria. So the question is, where are all those things going? So what you now talk about is what you now have on your hand is that you have a syndicate who are feeding fat from that thing. So if we all agree that there are syndicates eating from that thing, making it difficult for the economy to breathe, what do you do? Do you take it out and suffer more people, or do you do a facial withdrawal and go after those people, taking advantage of that subsidy? So I think that is where the agreement, that is where it needs to be fine-tuned, and I think that that is what Bola Ahmed Tinubu should have considered, and you see, it equally raises the question of why is it so difficult to have a refinery, whether modular, whether the type you have in Dangote, the type that has been put in place by Dangote, whether repairing all our refineries in Warri, Port Harcourt, Kaduna, So why is it so difficult to have this thing in place? So these are critical questions we need to ask ourselves. I was looking at a figure recently, and what I discover is that of all what of all countries producing oil, Nigeria ranks as one of about one of the few that does not have a functional refinery all these years. Why is it that way? So now, I'm not quick to make any call on NLC vis-a-vis their strike action or whatever decision decide to. I'm not quick to make, because I know things are way complicated when it comes to policy negotiation, at the level of labor, the civil society and government. So it will not be very, unless I have a clear figure, a clear, positions on both sides. But if I were to make a guess, I think that NLC agreed that subsidy should go, but is insistent that things must be put in place before you do that. So before you remove, you have to give us something first, and as it so happens, what Tinubu decides to give is in piecemeal, does not even solve any problem. So I think that is what we have. So we must not be too categorical about condemning either one of them. I think it will be ill-advised to attack Niger, or in fact, even the sanction is going too far, because you only need to see what is happening there in Niger to know that the coup is popular. If the people insist that this is what they want, so what's your problem? So regardless, then again, let us. I think Tinubu was too much in a rush, not looking at over 60 or almost 100 years of relationship between Niger and Nigeria. We are talking of a lot of treaties like the Niger River Treaty. I learned that we decided to cut off electricity from Niger. Does he even understand that the River Niger, the river on which Kanji Dam is dependent on flows in from Niger Republic? They could decide to stop the river, build their own dam, and Kanji Dam will be useless. And you see, the thing is this: the former president of Nigeria, Muhammad Buhari, once on TV said that he doesn't believe in all these lines, all these borders that were created by the white man, that he has an abiding interest in Niger, because that's where his relative comes from. That is where he's related to a lot of people there. His brothers and sisters and cousins are there. So that is for the head of state. And I know a lot of core northerners have relatives over there. So if you levy a war against them, so you are asking Nigerians to fight a part of themselves. So that is, I think it was a bit foolhardy, if you ask me, and it was ill thought out. It shouldn't have been, but of course, like I said, it could have been, because he has some pressures on him. The thing is, like I said, I think that Tinubu should think things through. I believe I was on air once saying that if you say Tinubu is your choice, because what you think he did in Lagos, what you should ask yourself, that the Tinubu you are seeing now, is it the same Tinubu you had in those days? You see, if initially he said he was going to give palliative of 8,000 naira to a family and said it was ill thought out and reversed it at this early stage, now he decided to give it to the state government. You see, that is, it simply tells you that he wasn't even prepared. It was more like he was in a rush. All these things were unnecessary. These are unnecessary gaffes, that imperils an administration from the word go. So you're giving it. You see, don't forget that subsidy regime is being manipulated by a cabal embedded within government. You are bringing palliative for these same people again. How are you sure that it's going to trickle down to the ordinary man on the street? And in any case, I've been looking at all the rollouts. What is the format of getting it to the average man on the street? We are talking of civil servants. What is their ratio vis-a-vis those that are not engaged by government? Let's take education, the educational sector, for instance. Primary school teachers, how many do you have vis-a-vis the ones that are engaged by private sector, the private sector. I can assure you that in Kwara State alone, if you are going to do the ratio, you see for one government teacher, you have close to 30 private sector teachers. So you give the palliative to that teacher, what of the remaining 29 or 30? What happens to them? So you see, government need a lot of thinkers around it. That is why it is always good, you know, and that is, I think that has always been the problem of our democracy. We don't tend to think deeply about the choice of persons we want to rule. That is why it appears that democracy is not working in this part of the world. That's my take.